Welcome back to Ascend Legal 101. I'm Ramona, and today our guest is Tracey Burns, who holds a Master Certified Coach credential granted by the International Coach Federation. She's a coaching supervisor and is certified in trauma-informed practice. Tracey has written and delivered a series of transformational programs over her 17-plus years experience, including The Bomb-Proof Executive and Creative Conflict, written specifically for individuals and teams to harness the power of crisis and conflict and stimulate innovation and creativity. Her coaching method is ontologically based, a cutting-edge approach that encompasses an understanding of how our thoughts, physiology, and use of language impacts our world. Tracey works with extraordinary entrepreneurs up to super cool things in life, entrepreneurs who tend to self-identify as adorable weirdos, fringe dwellers, pioneers, the outliers, the rebels, the innovators, and creators of wild and brilliant ideas. Please help me welcome Tracey Burns. Welcome back to Ascend Legal 101. Today we're with Tracey Burns, who's a leadership coach. And I'd just like to thank you, Tracey, for joining us today. And I've actually known Tracey for a long time, over 30 years, even though we only look like we're 30.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, because I started out probably around the same time in law as you did. I might have been a bit after, I don't know. And Tracey worked with her family business. They were service providers to almost every law firm in town. And they did lots of legal research, and perhaps you can talk to us a little bit more about that. But I was really excited to speak with Tracey because I've seen the progression from law to coach to a sort of different kind of coaching, much more focused, much more holistic. And I've actually had the opportunity and the privilege of spending some time in leadership training with Tracey. When I was first the first female president of Flight Training Facility on Vancouver Island, we had started a chapter of Women in Aviation, and we put together a 6-part leadership learning series. And Tracey started it off for us and got us on the right track. And she ended the series. And the series grew, participation in the series grew over that sort of 5 or 6 month period of time. And I know at least 2 people in that group who made profound and significant changes as a result of that in their lives. One person quit her job, started her own business. And another person, he did not quit his job, but he didn't quit his profession, but he changed his job and also started his own business. So I've had the privilege of watching people take what it is that you've shared with them and really do the work to implement that. So I'd really love it if you can tell us about your personal journey from law to coaching. How did that transpire?
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for inviting me to be on. We do have a long-standing, shall we say, love affair. I've always been a fan of your amazing piloting and all the crazy, amazing things you do too, Ramona, and in your business too. You've got some great years behind you and many more ahead. In terms of the journey into coaching was super fascinating. I think what a lot of people maybe didn't know is actually before I even landed in being a co-owner of our family business, which is multi-generational and comes with a whole set of family dynamics, is that I actually had my beginnings in family law. And so, working as a almost legal assistant, doing research and all kinds of things there. And, it kind of began my fascination with human behavior. So it had very early beginnings. And then fast forward into the family business. And as I say, all the challenges that go along with not just even navigating a business, but a multi-generational family business with very differing viewpoints and future directions. And, one set of generation looking at winding down and one generation looking at winding up and navigating change. And so neither one right or wrong, but it, definitely became, I think for me, a fascinating journey in personal discovery, self-discovery, self-awareness. And also there were a lot of things that go along with being a very young manager, a lot of bias. And so I had to learn how to become good at navigating maybe even ageism, being young, and the perception that things were maybe handed to you, or so lots of really kind of cool dynamics. And the thing that I always do when challenged is research. And that began my fascination with, I discovered coaching and the power of coaching, and just became super fascinated with even training people, putting two people in a position, and one would rise, give them the same amount of attention, but the other would maybe falter, and what was that? And coming back to me always, like, what could I be responsible for, do better, that might actually produce different outcomes for those both individuals? Rather than have one rise, how about two rise? What would I need to change? And also highly fascinated with organizational culture. So, which again, really takes looking and examining at me as leader. I'm responsible for this culture to a degree. I'm contributing to it energetically. So again, totally fascinated with that, which is really team coaching. So,
Right.
yeah.
So in your family business, at that time that you would have become a manager, that was sort of in the 90s. Am I right
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
So that was also a very different time for all of us as women. And, again, in law.
Mm-hmm.
So did you find that, I don't know if being given an opportunity is that's not at all the right phrase I was looking for. I mean, did you have to research it and find it in yourself and sort of implement it? Did you feel like you had to be very strict with your boundaries? In the 90s for me, people were still slapping me on the ass and, calling somebody my girl and thinking everything
Mm-hmm.
was A-okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If they thought it was not, they didn't like the color of your tights.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It was perfectly fine to
Yeah.
say, please don't wear those color of nylons again.
Yeah. Yeah,
Do you
it
know what I
was a whole
mean?
other world.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if we could step into a time machine, I think, today's women would be appalled in terms of how it really just was back then. So definitely it's a really interesting point you bring up. I think back then in the 90s, my first child was born at 90, 90, and then next one born 92. So now we can't call each other 30 anymore, Ramona, because I have a 31-year-old. So it's like kind of weird, but I'll take it. If I can pass for it, I'll take it. But yeah, it was, still very much the expectation that even my education or I think my career pursuits took a back seat to raising the family, and that was a priority. So I think there was, I would say, a bit of a nuclear bomb in my life was when I was diagnosed with cancer. And that was sort of the like, whoa moment that really, it was almost like stepping outside of my body, my life, and everything I had known to be true, to actually take a look and say, whoa, I may not necessarily have a lot of time left on this planet. What am I doing? And began to own my brilliance and began to kind of like Incredible Hulk, like breaking out of that, becoming that green Hulk. That was kind of the experience. Like I was crawling out of this cocoon and, becoming this like butterfly and didn't quite know what color that butterfly was going to be yet. But that was the experience, was breaking away from what this like perfect family looked like and finding my feet. And it created breakdown in the beginning and blossomed into breakthrough, which is kind of, it's a coachy, jargony thing. We really believe in breakdown, it's causing breakdowns, and there's always a breakthrough gold from every great breakdown. So that's probably the fastest, shortest answer to a really interesting journey.
Great. Well, I
Yeah.
think you just answered my next question. I'm wondering if you can tell me sort of what the focus of your practice is. How did you become a coach? I mean, I think a lot of people, you see those gimmicky-ish kind of ads about coaching, whatever. But I know that you actually have spent years, educating yourself and others in coaching. And I'm wondering if you can tell me about that.
So first of all, how did I become a coach? Well, after selling my shares in the family business, I moved to California. I actually became interested in finance. And so I took, courses in the States to become a broker, and I was a realtor for a time. And the reason I sort of thread these pieces through is because it all played a huge part in my honing, if you will, that eventually led me to coaching. And in fact, it was one of my best friends, originally from New York, and absolutely freaking hilarious. And we met at work, and we were both mortgage brokers. And he walked in one day, and I did very well as a broker. I really loved what I did. And a point to notice is that I was actually more interested in the people than I was in churning loans. And it was a very high volume residential lending atmosphere, kind of like being a stockbroker, but that's the way it was there. And I kind of enjoyed that fast pace, and I did very well. And I love to train new brokers as they came through the doors, and had a really good eye and ear and understanding of all the different loan programs. There was like hundreds of them. And I just learn to assimilate that information for myself and then turn it into training for them, and love to see people win and grow and rise in their own sales. And I just found that really exciting. But anyways, he came in one day and threw a card down on my desk, and he said, "Here, go do that." And I was like, what are you talking about? And I picked up this card, and it said on the back, accomplishment coaching, with this little stretchy guy. And it had the name of a contact, and he said, "You are that. You don't even know it, but you're that." And he said, just like in Monopoly, do not, collect 200, go right now, do this. And so I did call, and I went and viewed the program, and I fell in love. I thought, this is what I meant to be. This is so amazing. So I joined the program in 2003. And yeah, thanks for the acknowledgement. You're right. There are a lot of people who are coaching, and I certainly welcome people to coaching. And coach can be a verb, and it can be, off the side of your desk. People can adapt coaching skill sets into their leadership, something that I definitely teach. And you can choose the professional coaching route, and there is a lot of education to it. And so from that card thrown on desk, the journey wasn't a clear straight line to, all right, now I'm a coach. It actually, took till 2007 for me to graduate, to actually embrace the fact that you could do this for a living. And it's funny you mentioned the holistic part of it, because that really has been also honing of, dropping what my friends love to call the briefcase, bringing that very law business approach to something that's very touchy-feely, and learning how to incorporate the two. And that has really been a personal journey too, is embracing that part of me, the woo-woo part of me, and also having it fit in team coaching. And one of my favorite things is to bring love into corporate boardrooms and shock people and, but drop that in. But that is where our most profound teaching can really happen, especially when we're evoking behavior change, and is to really approach things with a very love-based foundation. So anyways, did I answer all of those amazing questions in there?
I think so.
Yeah.
What I really love, you have, so it's not a tagline, but I'm going to call it that. You say that you're for the fearless, adventurous, undaunted, unflinching, bold, daring, audacious, and spirited. I love that. So tell me what that means to you. Are those your perfect clients? Or is that the result? Or do you know what I mean?
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, that hearing you say it makes my tingle all over. Whether it's like small business, big business, entrepreneurs fascinate me. And the one thing that we look at, like Simon Sinek, we look at Adam Grant, we look at Steve Jobs, they're just incredible individuals. They're usually very badass. And in order to run with a really unique business idea, to be a pioneer, you have to really be willing to go against the grain. You really have to have courage and boldness. And I think you need to be a little bit comfortable with being extraordinarily uncomfortable in being the first one to an idea. And that kind of embodies who I've been. I was the first ontological trained individual to come back into British Columbia and run with this crazy, like, what are you talking about? Ontological coaching, the study of being. And being a pioneer was really confronting to come and land into a body of established coaches, graduated from Royal Roads or coach training or Erickson, somewhat standard coach training, and be this outlier who was talking all this crazy notion about being. And now it's interesting because emotional intelligence has really taken off in the last few years. And that's how I see ontology it's the study of being. It really is emotional intelligence. It's awareness, the ability to self-regulate. So back to the outliers, rebels, and all is that they are my ideal client. They can be an outcome. So if you don't self-identify as that, and you're still, in business, whether you're running a law firm or, you're operating a boutique, or definitely there's an element of dare to be different about you. I'm sure we'll find it and capitalize on it. So yeah, it can be the outcome, or it could exist and we just breathe life into it or expand it.
Right. And were there any times, I've seen some coaches who start out going, these are the people I want to work with, or this is what the focus of my coaching practice is going to be, and then it changes. And so the shift changes and the brand changes, and my own business has changed that way. So I don't mean for this to sound sort of judgmental. I'm just trying to create an example. So the nature of your practice will shift. Did you find yourself in that position? And if you make those changes, how do you gain traction again? How is that course correction kind of made without sort of, I suppose people fall off and come back, or
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that I forget who to credit for this quote, but your life is your leadership journey. I'll need to find who said that. I wrote it down just recently. When you're coaching, your coaching journey really does closely parallel your life. So the things that a coach is working on tends to be the client they'll attract. And so there is a natural selection that happens. Not just the coach goes out and seeks those particular clients. a client that's going through divorce, or a client who is, working on legacy, but there is definitely an attraction factor that happens also, that the coach then, I certainly found myself, I start out in this. And it's interesting, in the beginning, I thought I would serve a certain type of client, but then started attracting a very different client. And in fact, predominantly my coaching practice in the beginning was entirely made up of men. I coached very little women, and it usually was like strong, powerful men, and they usually had a lot under their care and control. So, and that shocked me at first. I didn't understand necessarily what was it in me that I was emanating, that, this was who I served well. And I think too, my niche began emerging. There's an active practice that I think most coaches take on, and is to take a look at your client base and see who you have in it. What are they working on? And what are their projects? What are their goals, their aspirations? And when you look at that, you begin to pick out threads and patterns. And the one thread and pattern that was consistent for me was communication and relationship, whether it was personal or corporate. I seemed to be our communication and relationship wizard. I could hear blocks and stops, or miscommunication, clients being misunderstood. And that's a theme that has remained the gold thread through my entire practice. It hasn't ever strayed far from that. Whether I'm team coaching or working with an individual, it all seems to come and thread back to that, which thrills me, because I still love those two areas. I'm pretty passionate about those.
Did you find when you were building your client base, were there any particular stops and starts? Like, did you have any experiences where you're like, holy smokes, we have to course correct right now, or this just isn't working? Because I think a lot of people who do coaching, or who even counselors and people like that, it's the building the base. And certainly in our town, there's a lot of word of mouth referral.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you had to make any sort of significant shifts where you're like, holy smokes, we need to course correct here?
I can't say that I have ever course corrected in reaction to, something profound like that. I honestly can't recall any. I have certainly experienced, I think once a pioneer, always a pioneer. And I think, like, the quality in a pioneer is that by nature, I'm always looking out ahead, not just 5 years or 10 years. And I'm also assimilating a lot of data, economy. I have my ear in organizations. I'm a voracious reader of everything, current, fiction, fact, everything I can get my hands on. So I tend to think like that being a pioneer has me alter course and more through the lens of, what does the world need right now? What is the world talking about? And also, I'm in that world, so I'm impacted. So, I think it's really just listening to what the world needs, so that it's allowed me to course correct naturally, and without any great stops and starts. And I know one question you did ask me previously there, and that was about, if you do stop, how do you get started again? And I think the key there is to not stop at all, to keep going. I think, it's one thing I love to tell brand new coaches, is that there will come many times in your career where you think, this is super tough. I think there's a lot of myth out there that you hang a shingle and you call yourself coach and suddenly you're profoundly six figures. It's just not the case. There's a lot of, gimmicky things out there that tells that story. And I think the coaching journey is about self-education, self-work, professional development, word of mouth, core values and being healthy in terms of one of my huge core values is integrity and client results too. And I think if you're willing to be the source of it all, you and I love that, right? It's like that personal work. As long as you're committed to your personal work, even if if you upset someone, or with integrity, you can clean that up. And coaches are all about, like, at least the ones that I know, and certainly how I'm committed, is we like to think we demonstrate deep transparency, that we don't fake it. We'll show you our mistakes. We're pretty open kimono, because it's pretty hard to bring presence and be inauthentic at the same time. It's virtually impossible.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of living our core value, certainly, that I do.
You've talked about the coaches that you train. So I realized that I haven't asked you about that yet, and I'd like to ask you about sort of building teams, but I'm going to sort of backpedal for a minute and ask you about the programs or teaching programs that you provide to train coaches. And are they already coaches, or are they, brand new?
Yeah, both actually. So I was on the leadership team of Accomplishment Coaching for many, many years, and I trained. It's an intensive, rigorous, incredible, amazing program that I love to give a shout out to. I'm currently on a leave of absence from the teaching of that, and those are brand new coaches. They've never coached before. So we offer a year-long training program. It's ontologically based, which is what I like to call my silver bullet, the training in ontological coaching. And so those were brand new coaches, and they came from different walks of life, different industries. In those training programs, we would find therapists who are wanting to throw a coach hat on rather than the therapeutic hat, and learn how to combine both. I've trained people who in those programs wanted to do it professionally and have a private practice like I do. And I've also trained coaches who are, perhaps in the government, and they're internal coaches and wanted to take professional coach training. So that was through Accomplishment Coaching. In terms of my own offerings, I teach advanced coaching. So that would be coaches that have graduated from their own coach training programs, whether it's Royal Roads, Erickson, CDI, some of the coach training programs out there. UBC now has coach training, and I'll do advanced coaching with them, deeper dives, increasing intuition, sometimes even introducing ontology or the ontological coaching. I offer team coaching. And there's a third arm that I teach, and that is coach supervision. And so, actually, I should back up and rephrase that. I don't teach coach supervision. I provide coach supervision. And it's kind of funny. There's industry resistance to the word supervision, because it's language is so supercharged for people. Hey.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the word supervision, people are like, how audacious, like, how dare you? I've coached for 20 years. What do you mean you're going to supervise me? But actually, if you think about the word broken down, it's like small supervision. So it's like really with altitude, I just provide support for any ethical concerns, any issues they're having with clients. It doesn't even have to be issues. Like, we coaches take on a lot energetically, not as deep, but sometimes we become the holders of client stories. We're trained to dabble and skirt, and we're in the gray area where coaching and therapy intersects, know when to shoot our clients over to therapy, but we still are skirting those. So sometimes coaches need supervision or support to talk through, to sweep away that energetically, to get clean and clear again, much like a therapist is supervised for their client files too. So, yeah.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that is striking to me about being in law for a long time is, and the confidentiality that surrounds law,
Mm-hmm.
how much of your clients, or certainly in my experience, how much of my clients' trauma I had internalized over time, because I've been in
Mm-hmm.
law since I was a teenager
Mm-hmm.
and started at Crown Counsel.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the yucky, yucky,
Yeah.
yucky gunk. So, so I see a therapist still,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that you're not taking on all of your clients' stuff, or sometimes you just, depending on your own life circumstance, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
come up out of the blue somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really nice to hear that there's that sort of support for your coaches, but also almost a check and balance. I'm happy to hear that you provide that piece, because I always feel like that's a piece that's missing.
Well, we certainly, I mean, that's part of coach training. And of course, every year that you're a coach and where you're credentialed, certainly by the International Coach Federation, we're required, we have professional development that we're required to do in order to keep our credential current. And so there, I think that's the one beautiful thing about, there's a quality assurance when hiring ICF coaches, and that an organization can be sure that we've met those standards and rigors, and that I'm coached. I have a coach supervisor. I'm coached every week, and I also have a therapist. So, and we also have training as coaches in terms of what belongs in our conversation and our sessions and what belongs over there. And that can also, mean not just therapists, but when I'm truly doing my job and I'm coaching, I'm not actually giving advice. I'm not training. I'm not an expert in anything other than those evocative questions, accessing my intuition, and knowing how to promote or evoke and get underneath the things that people hide from themselves. So, and it's a very different modality. I think there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about what a coach does, but I like to call it true blue coaching. And when we're doing that, we're not giving advice. And that makes it very easy to say, oh, we're talking about real estate. What support might you get with this real estate sounding question? And again, we're tapping back on and accessing the client's brilliance. And we're really just asking, what do you want to do about that?
Right.
We're inviting them, because part of it, again, is mostly in coaching, the way I do, is supporting that individual to grow for themselves, not give them answers. And now we're affecting their brain, we're rewiring, and we're supporting them to, just to lean into a different part of their brain and get creative vision, lots of different, skill sets in there. And it lets us off the hook too. I don't have to be a real estate expert, nor a finance expert, nor an expert in law. And so it also lends itself to being able to coach in lots of different industries. And in fact, probably shouldn't be an expert in the industry I'm coaching inside, to keep it clean and my bias out of the way. And again, we do have training for that too. So it doesn't mean we can't coach in the industry we came from, but we have to be responsible for the biases that we bring in.
Right.
Yeah. And trauma too. Like, before we jump, it's like, I'm trauma informed, trained, and certified. And so there is a way that we travel through our client stories and take care of our own self. And also being trauma informed, we don't travel all the way, like using questions that have our clients in our heads a lot. So certainly the work I do also incorporates body movements, tapping, and, a lot more of not stepping through the story to re-traumatize, but learning how to negotiate the story so that I am not taking it on,
Right.
and the client isn't re-traumatizing and sharing something, right? So they learn too how to share the details, and it actually can be very healing, the coaching process also, but that's not what we're necessarily here for. We're not here to replace therapists.
Right.
We couldn't be here without them. I love them. So
Right.
yeah, definitely our partners.
I feel the same.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even with my candidates, people come in the door for a new job and
Mhm.
we'll chat for a period of time and you realize, you don't need a new job. You need a new husband. Or, I'm
Or
noticing a
transform the
pattern here.
relationship with your husband,
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So
can
I
occur
have
like that.
cards. I have a lot of, I don't know, I can't make my finger go to that spot. I have cards for a whole bunch of therapists, like, oh,
Yeah.
you might want to see
Yeah.
somebody because I'm
Mhm.
not qualified to help you with this.
Mhm.
If you really and truly need a new, let's talk, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
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 So when you are coaching teams,
Yeah.
really, really interested in how do you coach, as we sort of talked about earlier, how do you coach differently, I suppose, in a really modern business environment? Maybe the people are
Mhm.
younger, they're more sort of progressive, they understand working in a team in a different way.
Mhm.
And then a not so modern business environment, such as,
Mhm.
what we would have called the old boys club, or
Mhm.
where it's
Mhm.
very top down, everybody has their place, they do their thing. And then, but you have people who are clearly just chomping at the bit to assist in making change in the organization, but don't really feel like it's their place to do that.
Yeah.
So how
That's
do
a great
you,
question. Yeah. So the big thing about team coaching, and I think any coaching engagement occurs when you, first of all, go in and you do an assessment. So I'll have a meeting with, the person that's bringing me in and has an idea of what they'd like support with. And then I'll meet with all of the players, who will be basically in the room participating in the team coaching. And I'll meet with them maybe individually and maybe as a group. And I will take stock, as a coach does, of the things I need to take stock of, the group dynamics. In team coaching, there's a lot of things in the system, as we say. So there's the environment, the culture, there's the economy, there's vendors, there's big clients, and all of these things play huge influence and contribute to the system. So as a coach, I tend to take a step back and embrace it all. We have to look at all of those dynamics and how they play into, how are they contributing to the situation. So, for example, modern versus that, generational concern, we'll call it, old boys school or whatever shows up, senior partner, young articling students, we'll take those dynamics and simply sit with them and understand how they're playing out in a particular way. And then in the coaching engagement, I ensure that I am able to contract with everyone that we're going to address all these issues. That is there anything that's off the table, anything we can't talk about? And then I'll actually sometimes take a look and say, whether or not I think I can produce the results that they want out of the team coaching, if they're saying, no, we can't talk about this thing. Because that thing might actually be the thing
it's
that's in
always
the
the
way.
thing, right? It's
Yes.
always the thing.
Yeah. So I'm very careful. And actually, those interactions are, again, they're part of my assessment process that I've been trained in to take all that in, understand it all, understand the group dynamics at play. And then if we have a green light and all parties are a go, I usually have a conversation in those meetings that goes something like, are you willing to be the issue? Are you willing to have people quit? Sometimes people recognize their core values don't line up with the core values of the organization. And there's no harm in that. People shift companies all the time. Or sometimes people recognize they're in the wrong role. And so, coaching can be extremely disruptive to systems in order to actually then bring a system into a proper alignment, if you will. There's no such thing as proper, but into healthy alignment. So it can get a little messy. Again, I'm totally trained for that. And it's kind of fun. I mean, we all end up having fun in the end. And, we're getting to those intimate conversations that people won't have. And I think that's where definitely having a sense of humor, learning when to bring it at the right time. We learn how to hold a room in such a way that we can dance and tango with big bad energy, the guy that wants to throw his chair against the wall. And when we're going into these and when I'm actually engaged in the team coaching, we'll usually have all agreed that I'm going to call out in a gentle way, but I don't step over anything. I will address the thing. Hey, I notice there's something happening over there. Looks like you have something to say. What would you like to say? But I'm also putting down, before we have those kinds of engagements, rules of engagement, and I have everyone adhere. When things get hot, let's have a safe word, or let's have a way we proceed that we can all agree on that keeps the conversation safe. So I'm really supporting the room and each individual in the room to work with their triggers, to name them, to be willing to do the work in their chair, to do their own self-awareness, self-regulation work in the moment with my support. So if they've never done this kind of work before, I'm totally here for them. And part of that process is supporting them to see how they may be contributing to the breakdown in the organization in a very loving but direct way. I don't mince words either. So it's a long answer, but there's a lot to team coaching that people, sometimes don't really understand. And I love it. It's actually one of my most favorite engagements is team coaching.
I appreciated that long answer because you answered a bunch of my questions.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Well, taking personal responsibility is important to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Being accountable, integrating your own core values. Sometimes it takes a long time to realize that it's not that you're not getting along with somebody, just sort of that blanket, or it's really that your core values are so different than theirs. This isn't going to work. And to be really honest and truthful about that, I mean, that is hard. That's not easy. So, and even just recognizing that, we do, certainly in my business, we're not looking at core values isn't what I do every day. Right?
Yeah. I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in many businesses where you're a service provider or, something, I mean, you're doing your work. You're not looking at, oh, these are my core values and I'm really rubbing up against.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, while we're on the subject of core value, one of the greatest jobs that we do in coaching when we first engage is we actually, well, particularly in the way that I'm trained, I'm very conscious of language. And so, we'll create definitions of things. We'll get it out in the open. What's your understanding of the word integrity? How would you model integrity? What does it mean to you? So sometimes a company will set core values, but they don't know how to be their core value. And that can be the very piece that's missing. It's that, we have these great core values. They sound amazing. We were aligned when we did that cool core value, meeting and established them all. But that's where we stopped. And so even just getting a company to, okay, what would it look like to actually shift, to embrace your core values and to be your core value? How would we see that show up in your business if we simply use those to align first? And same thing. So once we're clear on what those mean, and sometimes it's super fun. We sit in a room of like 10 or 12 individuals, all, players in the business, and they'll be like, what? That's what you thought our core value meant. And it's really cool. there can be even a layer of relief in that small process, getting to the defining and understanding how people are relating to those. And we could actually take that, and that's one of the big roles in team coaching too, is what does it mean to you, the success of this project? Like you creating results, what does that actually mean from your department? Like when so-and-so says this over in engineering, you know, what does that mean to you over you and to you in finance? And listening, we're all working toward the same project, but we had different ideas of what completion meant. That can be a defining moment where we find the missing link and we get a team reconnected again. It's really brilliant and fun work. And it can be a lot harder than that too, not just redefining language, but all the ways we're showing up inside of those results where we're maybe not being responsible for our part in it.
Right.
People are human.
And
their own stuff gets in the way.
I want to be aware of the time.
Yes.
But I have a million questions on this subject right now. Like we could go down a big rabbit hole right now. So I'm thinking that I'm just going to ask you this final question in this subject. And then I just want to be mindful of your time. But what if you have somebody who doesn't see themselves as somebody who can contribute or feels really disempowered in their position?
Mm-hmm.
They're just not on the management team. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps the management team is doing coaching or organizational strategy. And then you've got somebody who's brilliant or who just wants to contribute to the organization in a sort of more different kind of way, but feels like it's not their place to contribute. What would you suggest to somebody like that?
I would say for them to get their own individual coaching and get supported in their own way to, definitely there are two sides in a relationship. So if that management team is getting coaching, hopefully one of the outcomes of that coaching is about learning how to hold perspective and to welcome perspective. And obviously in some businesses or at varying times in a business, someone has to call the shots. Mm-hmm. Someone has to lead and make decisions. And they're not always going to be popular with everyone. And I think that's the thing of, like the consequence of being a great leader is that you can't please all the people all the time.
Right. Almost never.
Yeah, almost never. Absolutely. But part of the outcome of management coaching really could be an altering of how you negotiate or how you speak with your staff or engage your staff. And are you creating space such that those individuals that don't ordinarily get to speak can have their perspectives shared and heard? To be seen and heard is of great value in organizations. And in fact, again, I'm super passionate about, healthy organizations. And promoting healthy organizations, promoting healthy culture. And part of that is communication. Or that individual where that management team, maybe there's a little more consulting and a lot less coaching in, whatever it is that they're engaging in. Maybe they don't get there where they see that it is valuable to engage their staff's perspectives. I think a great solid leader is one that can hold all parties' perspectives. I think there was a crazy reality show. It was super fun to watch. It was the CEO or COOs would become like the guy at the Starbucks windows or, and it was brilliant for that. And, because they actually learned like how their frontline people, what they were putting up with. They actually learned their business from the people who knew. And so I think a great leader demonstrates those traits. There's a humility that goes along with that. There's great presence and confidence in a leader who can hold all perspectives and have their staff feel valued, seen, and heard. But again, back to that employee who maybe isn't experiencing that, maybe that team isn't as progressive, they're not there yet, and getting their support and looking at, There is power we can bring to situations where we maybe feel out of control or, you know, basically sidelined or undervalued.
Mhm.
Usually, again, coaches, particularly me, pattern watcher, I would be exploring where else does that show up? What can we learn about this, about you? And not from it's your fault. Never, never from that perspective, but just what can we learn about this? How have you found yourself here that you're in an organization where you're not valued, seen, or heard? And what is this an invitation for? So it may not necessarily be that they leave that becomes the outcome, but they find their voice. And maybe they do actually bring voice that they're able to influence, learn how to become an influencer, learn how to speak more clearly, learn how to be heard. That is a positive outcome. They still might leave and go somewhere else, but it doesn't always have to be the case. There's always opportunity to build and strengthen that individual that's experiencing that. And then they're at choice, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's one thing that you touched on that is, something that oftentimes breaks my heart, and that is oftentimes organizations will do little smatterings of coaching, and rather than necessarily looking at, can you do a more affordable blanket approach and so there's something that happens if middle managers are coached, but then the senior exec are not. We end up having a power dynamic where those middle managers are now expanded. Their perspective is shifted, their viewpoints are open, but we still have senior management. And it's kind of like hitting a glass ceiling. No pun intended, right? But it feels like a concrete wall. Because senior management are still in that unaware of what they're not aware of in their blind spots. And now the middle managers are awakened to possibility beyond what they were before. And so I really urge organizations that if they're adopting a coach approach, that they also consider that senior execs are coached also, so that we have the organization moving at the same time. And then we've got a meeting of the minds in that transformed place that they become after engaging in coaching. It's really critical. And a company might invest in coaching and be disappointed in, the results didn't necessarily carry. And that's the first place I look. And I ask, who was coached and what's their role? And so there's some hunting and digging to find out how come. Because coaching really does work when applied appropriately and given the creative license to work. So,
Right.
yeah.
Switching now to your personal habits and what you have going on in your business. You have a podcast, you have a busy coaching practice, you have a lot on the go. Can you tell me, do you have a daily personal practice that you use to sort of start or end your day or to prepare yourself for your clients?
I definitely do. Well, we talked earlier about energetically, and it was a hilarious entry. I'd always dabbled in the spiritual and the unknown. And it was interesting because, dabbling in that business world, law, finance, businesswoman, realtor, mortgage broker, the woo-woo thing way back in the day was like, what? I'm a businesswoman. What are you talking about? And so it was definitely an evolution that I definitely developed strong practices that are non-negotiable for me to be able to do this kind of work. And I do clearing exercises. I work with my coach to clear things out of the way. My daily practice, I have a well-being habit list that I work from daily, and it ensures that all aspects of my well-being are handled, and I'm super responsible for myself energetically. I will fire myself for the day if energetically I have something that I cannot clear.
Mm.
And if I'm ill, not feeling well, I will not hold my sessions. I'm a real stand for well-being. And I think that's a great model too. I mean, we've just seen a massive display of this at the Olympics where someone is taking a stand for their mental health and everyone's like criticizing her, and organizations, stress, burnout, overwhelm, working long hours, got to get it done mentality, creating massive breakdown. And then in the other realm, we've got Gabor Mate, the wisdom of trauma, when the body says no, and this convergence of East and West, yay, that finally we're learning as human beings that we cannot separate this spiritual, emotional that we are from our mind. We just cannot separate our lives and segment them out the way that we have. Push a pill at something rather than get to the root emotional cause. So part of my daily practice involves body checks and scanning and a lot of somatic practices. I move my body. I will go for a run. I have a healthy relationship to my emotions. I know how to express all my emotions. It's funny because, I cry a lot and deeply, but I also experience intense joy rather than this pinion down the briefcase that I used to be. And so there's a lot of benefits to, daily practices and rituals and learning how to navigate through a client's big energy. But again, it's part of our training too, is ICF, being with strong emotion is one of our core competencies that we're trained in. And so massive daily practices from the spiritual to the physical, to the intellectual, the emotional, and whatever is needed in the day, really. I wake up a human like everyone else craving coffee and
Right.
right. So just, really huge self-awareness practices and noticing where, a lot of coaching is keeping the client space clean and learning how to keep ourselves out of it and keep the spotlight on the client rather than on ourselves. But after 18 years of it, it's not that I still don't need to practice, actually more intensely practice,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do when you're training coaches or any of your clients and they say, well, I don't have time for that?
Well, first of all, it's a pretty common thing because, again, I was that girl way back in the day.
Right.
So those are kind of perfect for me because we just, what that is just a form of fear and resistance. And the languaging of that too, I don't have time for that. We get curious about that language. So what they're pointing to is a lens through which they view the world, that they don't have enough time, which implies that they're at the effect of time rather than in the driver's seat of their day.
Right.
So with a lot of love and compassion, exploring that and getting super curious, which could, just involve me dropping into my heart, meeting fear with compassion, maybe a little bit of humor, and just a gentle question. Oh, what's that about? Tell me more about that. Let's explore that time. What would it be like if you had more time? What if your relationship to time changed? What about that? And then just see, how do they do with those questions? If they're like, actually I had a session like this where you can't tell me the volume of my work right now is and I, my only job is to just meet that. Again, it's just a big wall of resistance and they're just scared behind that wall. So again, part of it in coaching is building a relationship with a client, gaining their trust as quickly as I can in order to be able to say the tough stuff that no one else necessarily challenges them with.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think differentiates a really good coach or counselor or therapist from just people like me. I'm really challenging. I'll ask really hard questions, or I'll just be offhanded by accident because I'm not being as mindful with my words.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm in a legal setting or in
Mm-hmm.
aviation, right? I'm like, well, really, is that working for you right now? I don't think it is. So, right, so I have to be more mindful, but it also depends who I'm talking to. But I believe a really good coach or therapist will challenge you and will challenge your beliefs and will say, Ramona, how is that working for you? Really, let's spend some time on that, because my answer to that question would have been very different than yours, right?
Yeah.
I'm really excited I've listened to some of your podcast episodes. It's fairly new. Can you tell me about it and where we can find it?
Yes, you can. Okay, well, first I'll tell you about it.
Yes.
So it is the podcast, and you read sort of what you called the tagline,
right?
For adorable weirdos, dare to be different, rebels, pioneers, et cetera, and the extraordinary, cool people up to, really cool things in life. And so, yeah, the impetus for the podcast is to give voice to people who are up to really extraordinary things. Some of the people that I've had on there are changing the world. And my life purpose is world at peace. And here's the woo-woo, right? So world at peace with love and light. That is my purpose on the planet. And so it is definitely my vehicle. And so the podcast really was birthed from giving voice, because I think entrepreneurs, being pioneers that they are, like I have clients currently who are changing the criminal justice system. Truly, they truly are. Like they're in a position of power to do so. And so interesting, fascinating, and they're facilitating their version of world at peace and completely rewriting how that goes in the future. And so really it's to give voice to those individuals and to hear those remarkable stories, and mostly to experience their way of being, because I have it that people cannot not be who they naturally are. And that's what I evoke in the podcast. So you can find it on Spotify and Apple and Google and Pandora, and even some podcast venues that I've never even heard of before. So, and Podbean, I can't forget to give a shout out to the hosts that are Podbean. But iTunes, Apple Podcasts, I think it's called, it can be found on there.
And it's called Talk to Tea.
Correct.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was my Twitter handle, and started, I think, way back in 2003. And I was like, I really wanted people to just talk to me. Mm-hmm. And so that I could, truly reflect my gifts, because I was definitely born to do this kind of work. And I know that the things that I laser intuit are a bit like downloads, and people are usually get the spine tinglies, and I love to gift people with that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so Talk to T was, come talk to me, let me run that conversation through my intuition and see what I can come up with. Yeah
I loved it. I love it.
Yeah,
there are a few more I sort of bookmarked because I thought, I have to come back to that. To that. I know you do online courses, you do workshops. I suppose we're potentially getting back into in-person workshops. Where can people find you? What are all the places that people can find you and find out about different training?
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely my website, and it's going through its oh my gosh, I think 25th reiteration. COVID hair, got long hair now, time to get the headshots updated. So we're in the midst of a big website revamp, but it's still there, traceyburns.com. EY. And on there, we have the Bomb-Proof Executive, and we have several other programs that I deliver. The Bomb-Proof Executive is deliverable in person via Zoom or in person when we're back fully. And it's also going online. So not only do I deliver it live via Zoom, but we're just launching our online program, which is actually designed to solve that issue I brought to the table about having as many people in your organization coached as possible. So the online version packs the same punch as in person, and they still get portions of me, but it's much more affordable. So my hope is that organizations won't bypass certain members of their staff and be able to have it be more accessible. So yeah, so online via Zoom and also still in person as usual. And I do most of my coaching by phone. There are some clients I've never met face to face for years and years and years. And sometimes people are confronted by that, like, what?
Right.
So, and I've always used Zoom. So there's always, well, if you'd like to see what I look like and that matters, then absolutely we can do Zoom, or if we're local, meet by, for coffee when we could. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to leave some links in the description of this video and also in the show notes for the podcast. So if people want to be in touch with you, that I'll have all of your contact information, and hopefully I'll get it all, because I know you're sort of, you do all the things.
Yeah.
Right?
I do. There's a nerd in me. The techno part of me loves, I have support people also, because sometimes I get myself twisted with the things I dare to dabble into. But yeah, there's a techno nerd in me for sure that likes to dabble with all of that. So I confess, he caught me.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Tracey. I really appreciate it. And I would encourage all of our listeners and viewers to please go on over to traceyburns.com and find out more.
Ramona, thank you so much for having me. You're an amazing host, and I've loved our relationship, both personal and professional, all these years. And again, amazing what you have done and created. And one of these days I'll get in a plane with you perhaps, but but amazing to watch your career trajectory, and yeah, and just to see where you are. And I'm excited to take a look at what might be next for you too.
Thank you.